Raghav Mehta wasn't the kind of man you'd notice in a crowd. He didn't speak loudly, didn't dress to draw attention, and rarely inserted himself into conversations unless invited. At 37, he lived alone in a modest one-bedroom flat on the quieter side of the city, had a stable job in an insurance firm, and maintained a routine that was almost monastic in its simplicity. Wake up at 6:30, tea at 7, work by 9, lunch at 1, return at 6, a walk at 7, and lights out by 10. It was a life of order and solitude, but it wasn't peace. There's a difference between a quiet life and a peaceful mind. Raghav had mastered the former, but the latter remained elusive. His days passed like train stations seen through a smudged window, similar, fleeting, and barely remembered. But deep inside him, a restlessness simmered. It was not the restlessness of ambition or desire, but of something subtler, a longing to feel anchored, composed, internally strong. This feeling had grown slowly, like a creeping vine inside the walls of his psyche. It wasn't depression. Raghav had known depression in his 20s, days when getting out of bed felt like lifting a mountain. No, this was different. It was a subtle fog, a feeling that the structure he lived in, the self he had built over years, was made of weak material. He functioned, yes, but he did not feel strong. A single comment could throw him off for days. A small mistake at work felt like a collapse. He feared conflict, avoided risk, and lived in the safety of routine. And yet, safety had become a cage. One Sunday morning, while cleaning the storage cabinet, Raghav came across an old diary. It belonged to his father, now 10 years gone, and in the back pages there was a note written in faded ink. The strongest people I've met are not loud or fearless. They are gentle, calm, patient. Not because life spared them suffering, but because they learned to carry it with grace. Raghav read the line 5 times. That sentence became a seed. It was the first time he considered that maybe his weakness wasn't in what he lacked externally, but in how he handled what was within. Maybe he didn't need more power, more success, more validation. Maybe what he needed was inner strength, not toughness, not bravado, but a mind that could weather storms, resist distractions, stand upright in solitude, and stay gentle in chaos. That day, Raghav made a decision. He decided he would dedicate a year to answering one question. How do you build a strong mind? Not through theory, not through reading self-help books, but through lived experience. He would become a student of his own mind. Every thought, every reaction, every moment of doubt, he would watch, reflect, and understand. He would train his mind like one trains a muscle. He didn't quit his job or move to the mountains. This was not a dramatic transformation. Instead, he began with small acts, shifts so subtle they were invisible to the world. He started by sitting in silence every morning for 10 minutes, doing nothing but watching his breath. It felt absurd at first. His mind resisted, chattered, wandered, complained. But he stayed, day after day. In that stillness, he began to hear the noise within. The insecurities, the fears, the old wounds. None of them were new, only unacknowledged. He started journaling every night. Not about events, but about emotions. What triggered him that day? When did he feel small? When did he feel strong? What thoughts repeated themselves like broken records? Slowly, patterns emerged. He realized how much of his life was governed by fear, not fear of death or pain, but of judgment, rejection, and failure. He also noticed his addiction to comfort. Not just physical, but emotional. He avoided hard conversations. He sought approval. He couldn't sit with discomfort. He escaped it with TV, scrolling, or snacks. Building a strong mind, he realized, meant becoming friends with discomfort. He made a rule: every week do one thing that made him uncomfortable. He started small, speaking up in a meeting, expressing disagreement calmly, saying no without apology. Then bigger, joining a public speaking group, sharing personal thoughts with friends, trying things he usually avoided. Each time the fear felt real, but each time he came out a bit taller. He began to redefine strength. It wasn't the absence of fear, it was the willingness to face it. It wasn't perfection, it was resilience. It wasn't control over others, it was control over self. Months passed, and though the world saw a little change, Raghav felt the foundation shifting. The cracks were being filled, not with cement, but with understanding. He began reading philosophy, not as escape, but as guidance. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Buddha. They all echoed the same idea: the mind is the only true domain we control. Everything else, health, fortune, relationships, is fleeting. He wrote this in his journal: peace does not come from perfect circumstances. It comes from training the mind to remain still in imperfect ones. That idea became his compass. One evening, after a long day, he received a harsh email from his boss criticizing a project he had worked hard on. The old Raghav would have spiraled, replayed the words, doubted himself, ruminated all night. But this time he paused, breathed. He reminded himself, this criticism does not define me. My worth is not decided by one moment. He responded to the email professionally, then made tea and sat in silence. That night, for the first time, he felt proud. Not of achievement, but of composure. Over the months, he faced more trials. A close friend moved away without much explanation. A minor health scare shook him. His mother had a fall. Each event brought stress, but each also became a test. Could he remain calm? Could he respond, not react? Could he carry pain without passing it on? He failed often. There were days he snapped, avoided, overthought. But each failure became data. He reflected, learned, adjusted. He began to see his mind not as a fixed thing, but as a living garden, requiring pruning, care, discipline. He began practicing the art of non-reactivity. When someone cut him off in traffic, he smiled instead of cursing. When a colleague took credit for his work, he noted it, but didn't internalize it. He began seeing ego as the root of much suffering, the need to be seen, approved, respected. He wrote, "Let go of the need to control how others see you. Strength is silent." One day he was walking in the park when he saw a child fall from a bicycle. The boy began to cry. His father rushed over and didn't scold him, didn't say, "You're fine." Instead he said, "Yes, that hurt, but you're strong. You can get up." It stayed with Raghav. Acknowledging pain is not weakness. Denial is. A strong mind is not one that suppresses emotion. It's one that allows emotion, feels it fully, and then lets it pass like a wave. By the 9th month of his journey, Raghav had become different. Not in appearance, but in essence. He was not invincible. He still had fears. But they no longer ruled him. He had built a mind that could hold space for discomfort, that could wait instead of react, that could step back and see the bigger picture. He met people differently now. He listened more, spoke less. When someone was angry, he didn't mirror it, he understood it. When someone gossiped, he changed the subject. When someone praised him, he smiled but didn't cling to it. His strength was not loud, it was grounded. The final test came quietly. It was a phone call. His manager told him there was restructuring. His role was being dissolved. He would get severance, but he had to start looking. The old Raghav would have panicked, felt shame, self-blame, fear. But the new Raghav sat in silence after the call, breathing slowly. Then he opened his notebook and wrote, "Nothing is promised. Nothing is permanent. The mind I've built is my true asset. I can start again. And he did. He took a month to reflect. Not rushing into job hunting, he volunteered at a local NGO helping kids with basic math. He realized how much joy he got from teaching. He applied for a program in educational design. A year later, he was working at a non-profit building learning tools for rural schools. It paid less, but he slept better. His days were filled with meaning, not just meetings. On his 39th birthday, he wrote a final note in his old journal, the same one he had started a year before. It read, "A strong mind is not a mind that never doubts. It's a mind that knows how to return to clarity. Not all days are easy, but I am no longer afraid of difficulty. My strength is not in what I show, but in what I carry and how gently I carry it." He closed the journal and looked out the window. The world outside was still noisy, chaotic, unpredictable. But inside, it was still. And in that stillness, there was strength.